Hello, everybody. No, this is not a random thing. This is the extra shift. We are back. My name's Chris. As always, I'm here with Brendon. How are we going?
Good. Yeah, it's been a little bit since we recorded. We're pretty deep in the off season at this point in time, but it's hockey's on the horizon. It's not too far off.
It is. It's definitely on the horizon. We're definitely in the phase where it's starting to come back. We had talked about a bunch of other off season content, but some of that's still going to happen. We've still got a couple of things that we normally do that we are going to do in the lead in because you've got a little bit of time up our sleeves still. But we wanted to sort of get back now as everyone's starting to get back to work. Teams are taking shape. Trades are happening. And so we're starting at the last of the contracts all signed as well. So we figured it's about time to bring everyone back up to speed with where we're at and start moving us into the new season. So we are at episode 211. So now what we have been doing, apart from the fact, for those who haven't watched or listened before, normally we talk about people who wear the number. So this is our third time through this one, number 11. But what I've added into the equation is a trivia question, purely for Brendon. Now, it's completely one way. What I've decided.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've done better than I thought that I was going to on some of these. They're tough.
I think you'll go okay with this one. So this one is a more interesting question. The question is the 2010-2011 season. See, there's the 11. Haha.
Yeah. Okay.
The top 10 scorers. How many of those are still active players?
Oh gosh. All right. So 2010-11. All right. So I would imagine that Crosby is one of them. It's probably, so we're talking about like Patrick Kane, Crosby, probably Malkin, like guys like that. I would imagine are probably the top 10 around about that point in time. Maybe not Malkin. It depends on the injury. Like 10, like I don't know if Crosby's out with injury and stuff at that point in time in that top 10. I'm going to guess. I'm going to guess 3.
Okay. You've got the number right.
Okay.
I don't think you've got the players though.
No, yeah. See, I'm struggling. I'm struggling to think of like what the 2010-11 season looked like. It's a long time ago now. At this point in time, it's like what 13, 14 years ago. Yeah. I think I'm probably very off with the actual players, but
okay. So have a name me one. I mean, okay. I'll give you
still active players.
I'll give you the easiest one, which is Ovechkin.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. This was probably. We're probably talking about a period of time that Crosby missed with injury.
We certainly are. Remember, they won the Olympic gold, and immediately Crosby got injured.
Yeah, that's true. Ugh, so much time he missed.
Ovechkin, by the way, is the lowest of the 3 active players in the top 10. He was 7th.
Stamkos?
That's the other one, and there's one more.
Oh gosh.
And he is still playing. Trust me. Keeps coming back for one more damn year. Trying to chase another cup and is just bad luck.
It's going to kill me when I hear it, and I just don't have an idea.
Corey Perry.
Oh, of course. Oh man,
Corey Perry was the highest scorer out of all of them, by the way. Perry was third with 98 points.
I didn't realize that he got that high in scoring. Okay,
second was a current NHL coach.
Yeah.
And then number 1 was Daniel Sedin.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I mean, like, this was the heyday of the Sedins. I'm like, okay, well, I can take the Sedins out of the equation. They're not
Sedin 104, St. Louis 99, Perry 98, Henrik 94, Stamkos 91, Aginla 86, Ovi 85, Teemu Solani is still there with 80. At 40, he scored 80 points. Yeah. Zetterberg at 30 scored 80 points, and then Brad Richards with 77.
Right. Okay.
That was John Tavares is on this list at 28. He scored 67 points. Sidney Crosby, by the way, for the record, played 41 games that season, but got 6 points in 41 games. Yeah. So, yeah, Sid scored the same number of points in 41 games that Joe Pavelski scored in 74.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Just, like, when people talk about Crosby, like, and now when you get people who maybe have only picked up hockey fairly recently talk about Crosby and look at him as, oh, yeah, but, Crosby was mental. Like, and this is the thing that a lot of people forget is just how good Prime Sid was.
And so how much of that we lost too? Like, probably
Exactly.
hundreds of points, hundreds of, games that we could have seen that
Sidney
just
Crosby
didn't happen.
Sidney Crosby is going to, like, again, Sydney, it's actually interesting because the parallels, and we are going to get onto all the current news, but the parallels between Sid and Mario, like the idea of everyone identifies how great and how amazing they are. And you can also look at both of them and go, but what if?
They could have been better. Yeah,
like, they could have been so much better than they were.
Yeah.
And, like, again, you'll have that argument from people about there are people still to this day who go, yeah, Wayne Gretzky, but Mario. And the same thing with, like, Sid is just insane. And yeah, so I just thought that was a really interesting one to start us off. I thought it was a really interesting.
Yeah, that's a throwback.
So also just a quick note here for everyone listening or anyone watching on the YouTube. Thanks to everyone deciding they want payment for platform, it's getting harder and harder to broadcast in multiple places. So Twitter is now deciding they're going to charge you for broadcasting live on their servers.
Oh, God.
So we're basically now purely on YouTube or on the podcast feed. So, because Facebook won't let you do it at the moment. Twitter won't let you do it at the moment. It's really bad. We tried Twitch, but YouTube's so much easier and so much better. So we just stick here. So let's get into the episode, shall we? And we need to begin. We have a trade to announce. I think you're going to want to hear it. I certainly was. The San Jose Sharks acquire Yaroslav Askarov, Nolan Burke, and a 2025 third from the Nashville Predators for Magnus Kroner, David Edstrom, and a 2025 first-round pick. Protected. Now, I need to talk about this.
Top 10 protected.
It is a top 10 protected pick for the Sharks. It is Vegas's pick. And the conditions on this pick are the definition of optimistic. Because
I love it.
the conditions on this pick are, if the Vegas pick is in the top 10, the Sharks will have the option to flip the pick with their own first-round pick. Like, Vegas is going to do worse. Now, I love this for Mike Greer on a couple of... First of all, I just love the audacity of Mike Greer doing that. That's so funny. Secondly, I like the trade. But the trade is sensational. And it's Mike Greer using resources super effectively.
So to be clear, for the context for everyone, Yaroslav Askarov has been, asking out for a little while. Obviously, the path to him starting in Nashville he's been blocked by UC Saros, and it didn't seem like there was going to be a clear, passing of the torch there at any point in the near future, and and obviously he's not getting any younger, and could easily kind of be a starter in the NHL sooner rather than later. So that was always a possibility that he would get moved in the near future. It was really just a matter of who was, and it did sound like there were other teams involved that could have, made offers and stuff like that as well, which is, this wasn't, I think honestly, props to Nashville for getting a fairly reasonable return considering the situation that they were under, that they, everyone knew that he wanted out. They didn't have quite the amount of leverage apart from the fact that, he's obviously like, a very highly touted prospect and a future starter in the league. But I think that they got a pretty reasonable return, all things considered.
I think it's a fascinating one because I think on what you can, at the same time with this trade, you can argue they got a pretty decent return and not a great return. All in one.
Well, I mean, it's hard when you don't get the best player in the trade. There's always going to be that factor.
I think you can argue both. And I think the other funny part, I feel really sorry for David Edstrom because, of course, David Edstrom is one of those rare commodities, a player that was drafted by the Vegas Golden Knights. And therefore, obviously was never going to play really in Vegas. Finds his way to San Jose as part of the Thomas Hertel trade. So realistically, when they went through what the trade is here, it's hurdle and a third really for Askarov when you really break down what they did.
Yeah, I mean, I think like Kroner is obviously a reasonable prospect in his own right, and the pick, we don't know what that's going to be. I mean, it's entirely possible that it could end up being a bag of pucks. This entire, prospects are a bit like that.
It's like Nolan Burks and make weight. The third, the Sharks might have given up their second first round pick, but they've gained a couple of thirds in this offseason already. And it's really interesting. They're stacking the depth cupboard, and what I feel with what they're doing, and we'll get a bit more into this with the next one as well. We'll talk about with the Sharks, but what they're really doing in my mind is they're gathering the resources for the trade deadline when it comes time to make weight on deals they're going to do at the deadline when they take on players, because that's what's going to end up happening. We can't retain salary, but the Sharks are going to end up being make weights in a bunch of deals at the deadline. So gathering the thirds now, smart move, really good idea by Mike Greer to start stockpiling picks, especially for players that probably weren't going to like Magnus Kroner was not going to see the ice this year. Like San Jose, the two goalies, the tandem they were sort of looking at running with is solid enough. Like it's a solid enough, tandem. You add Askarov in, who apparently, by the way, has said he is very happy to report to the AHL if he needs to. Yeah. That was one of the conditions. Was they asked him would he be okay with if he had to go down to the Barracuda.
And I mean, I think there's a slightly different prospect too with San Jose being in like the same building, and it's I think goalie development is such a fascinating thing in terms of like what they're so often asked to wait for like a very extended period of time before they really kind of get a chance, and they're expected to kind of be in a system and learn from exit. Obviously there was an opportunity for him to learn from UC Saros, but there's also a real benefit, I think, to actually kind of getting NHL time at some point in your career.
I think the other benefit for me is that he's not going to supplant UC Saros anytime soon, right? They've just signed that big deal with Saros. He's going absolutely.
Yeah, that was the nail in the coffin.
But that's good. I believe the Sharks are going to move either Blackwood or Vanacek before the end of the year. One of those two is going out the door. They're both on the last year of their deals anyway. If Askarov plays if he plays for the Barracuda for 12 months, he knows there's a pathway into the starting job, right?
Yeah, very
in Nashville, there's not. Even if he goes down for a year and plays, if he played a year in the Barracuda, and he won't, there's no way he stays a full year in the Barracuda. But if he plays the Barracuda for a whole year in a worst case scenario for him, next season is the starting goalie, right? I have no doubt in my mind that they're starting with him and they're going out and getting a veteran to back him up, or they're re-signing Blackwood or Vanacek to back him up. One of those is happening. So if I'm Askarov, this makes absolutely perfect sense to me. And also what the Sharks have done in stockpiling, like they've gone from a roster that the cupboard was absolutely bare on. And now if you start looking at what these prospects are they've got coming and what the lineup looks like, it's a little bit, they've still got plenty of gaps and plenty of things they've got to fix. Do not get me wrong for a second. But you can see something, which trust me, 18 months ago, you couldn't see anything. Now you look at the Sharks and you go, couple of seasons.
You can see where things are going to start to flesh out.
Exactly. They're going to have a terrible season again this year. We know this, but this is going to be the year where everybody on this roster, the coach included, are going to learn. This is a learning year, and the idea is it's a learning year where at the end of a learning year, you might end up with another high pick. Like, I don't think it really matters what happens to the Sharks. They've just signed the new coach long term. Ryan Wasowski's going to have the job going forward. They're prepared for this to not be great. Right? They're prepared for it to not be great. Yep. But what they want to show is progress. Alongside that, the San Jose Sharks also made another deal that initially I was not particularly thrilled about, but I get it. I do get it now. They acquired Cody Ceci and a 2025 third from the Edmonton Oilers for Ty Emberson. Look, the deal with this one is Ty Emberson had to play 50 games this year or he became a UFA. He was not playing 50 games for the San Jose Sharks this year. There was no way he was doing that. So they were going to lose him at the end of this deal for basically nothing. They looked at the situation, and Mike Greer has talked about the idea that he wants all this young talent on the offense, and he wants some experience on the back end to sort of, A, protect the goalies a bit, and B, help to mentor on the ice. And as much as I firmly believe that Cody Ceci is a pylon, he's a pylon with some knowledge. And he's a pylon, and he's a pylon who's okay on things like power plays. And like, I'm fine.
Yeah, he has an extensive NHL career and can be of use to a very young team for sure.
Yeah, I'm happy enough with Cody Ceci. I'm contented. I wasn't happy initially because I was very proud of the fact we'd never had Cody Ceci on our team, but I'm actually kind of good with it. I understand where they're coming from with it, and it's not really costing us a lot of money. We've got the cap space to do it. I also anticipate that if Cody Ceci has a good first half of the year, San Jose is going to flip him at the deadline. Again, that's another one. You have teams that will come to you looking for the last 6 months of a Cody Ceci contract.
That will happen. Someone will pick him up for a depth piece in a playoff run.
Ideally, what is currently our top line of defense, ideally at the end of the deadline, no longer plays for San Jose. Mario Ferrara and Cody Ceci are going to be the top line, and ideally, neither of them play for the Sharks at the end of this year.
Yeah,
ideally. So I'm happy with that. I'm comfortable enough with that, and I think for Edmonton, it helped them get out from under a bit of a cap crunch, which everyone anticipated, and we'll talk about the offer sheets that came later on. Everyone anticipated they were going to use that to cover the offer sheets, which they did not do. So we'll talk about that in a moment, though. Now, the next one is very much Brendon territory. The Pittsburgh Penguins make a deal.
Yes. So the Penguins acquire Rutger McGrady from the Winnipeg Jets for Brendan Yeager. Basically, really kind of the top prospect in each system, which isn't saying much for the Penguin system realistically. But a similar situation to Askarov, where McGrady had been asking out of Winnipeg, wasn't going to sign there for Winnipeg reasons, and basically was essentially like, trade me out. I'm not going to sign a contract here. So a tough situation for Winnipeg to be in terms of getting value. And I think that they did a reasonable job. Like I think that most prospect people would probably take McGrady out of the two like players. They're different kinds of players. Rucker is more of a like an all-rounder, kind of more physical kind of player who and Yeager is a little bit more of a shot first kind of guy who maybe will kind of I'm not sure if the ceiling is there necessarily, depending on how that goes. The knock against McGrady is his skating, but so basically they each are not like A++ prospects kind of thing, that they're fairly high-end prospects. The difference is Rucker is probably going to play in the NHL this year, which is a benefit to the Penguins. Yeager is probably a year or two away at least, and was probably realistically never going to be a huge help for the organization comparatively. So it's essentially a small upgrade for the Penguins in terms of what the prospects are projected to be. Obviously, again, these are prospects, and it could end up being in a few years' time that the deal looks good one way or the other. But a pretty reasonable swap, I think, considering what the Jets, had in terms of bargaining chips. Like they didn't have a great position to be in there, and they ended up getting, another 14th overall pick in, essentially just a draft back for, that situation. So I think, a pretty good trade for both sides.
It was an interesting one too, because Winnipeg fans took it as well as you'd expect to.
Yeah, obviously, they're never happy when someone doesn't want to stay in Winnipeg.
What do you mean you don't want to stay in Winnipeg? It's amazing.
Good riddance to this guy.
Good riddance. You don't want to be here? Well, you need to leave us. All that's what happens. That's largely what happens. Sorry, Winnipeg fans, but that's what happens. They leave.
Yeah.
You need to get them on very long-term contracts. But the Penguins weren't done, obviously, because that was the follow-up to obviously their first sort of slightly bigger trade.
Yeah, so they acquire Cody Glass and a 2025 third and a 2026 sixth from Nashville for Jordan Frasca, who is just a body to make the contracts work. But essentially a cap dump for Cody Glass, who was drafted high, bumped around a few different organizations, and had a bunch of concussion issues. He hasn't really kind of lived up to his potential because of those injuries, and this is kind of a fresh start for him. It's not actually a very expensive contract. I think it's like $2 million for 2 more years. But I think that he kind of got pushed out of Nashville in terms of what they were doing there. Wanted somewhere to start fresh. I just thought that maybe this was like an LTIR kind of dump, but it seems like he's healthy at this point in time and he's going to play. So we'll see if he can turn it around. I'm very concerned for him though with how many concussions he's had over a very short career.
Yeah, it's again. I thought it was a really like Cody Glass. I'm like, I couldn't remember where he was.
Yeah, he went to Vegas for a little while, and
I remember. I thought he was still in Vegas.
Yeah,
and when I saw that, I went, "Oh, they've traded with Vegas. Oh, he's in Nashville. Oh, okay." And again, Cody Glass is one of those guys where you're like, he's in the league, but you're never quite sure where he is in the league. He's there somewhere. But yeah, you have to make sure that you vaguely know where he might be.
Yeah, so he played 72 games in 2022, 2023 in Nashville and put up 35 points. That's the most amount of games he's played in the season. He only got 41 in last year. I think he had another, kind of concussion thing. So it's tough. Like, I hope that he can get healthy and make something of his career, because he's only 25 years old. I think it's a good gamble considering the complete lack of young players that Pittsburgh has.
No, exactly. Speaking of a bit of a gamble, the Montreal Canadiens acquire Patrick Laine and a 2026 second round pick from the Columbus Blue Jackets for Jordan Harris. Now, obviously, the big bit here is Patrick Laine. Now, Laine has been mentioned with the Habs a few times. To be fair, anyone who can put a puck in the net has been mentioned with the Habs over the years, because they're like, yep, we're getting that goal scorer. Yep, we're getting that goal scorer. I really like Laine. I'm fairly certain that you really like Laine. He's been through a lot. It could be a great fit for him. I'm still not convinced, largely because it's the Montreal Canadiens, and they have a habit of believing that when they sign any player, this is the cup. And I'm fairly certain that Montreal now thinks this is the cup. And I think my issue for this one is I think Laine can have a hell of a lot of success if you have patience with him. I don't know how patient Montreal is going to be.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think it could be a really good opportunity for him. They don't have a heap of like offensive depth. He can play in their top six straight away. I imagine that a big part of the arithmetic for this deal was the fact that they could take on the full weight of the contract, whereas probably a lot of teams couldn't or needed to send back cap and so forth. Not that Columbus needed a shitload of cap space.
I was going to say Columbus and cap space is not something that
but I mean,
really
having cap space, having $7 million in cap space is a commodity that they can use.
Well, they've got 15 million in space now.
Yeah, so it's not like there's a big free agent in there for them to sign, but they can leverage that for a lot of trade capital and so forth in the future with taking cap dumps and stuff.
And Jordan Harris last year was certainly Guy. And
well, yeah, I mean, like, I think that he's a slight like analytics darling in that people some people in the community have kind of taken a shine to him as a really good kind of defensive metrics guy, but he's not chopped liver. But obviously, this is mostly about getting Laine's contract.
Oh, it's about getting Laine.
You start, yeah.
Look, I think again, my whole concern about the Laine deal is not even really Laine. I think that, look, if you're going to have anyone as your coach with the idea that he might be able to motivate scoring, I think he's gone to probably the right person. But my problem with Montreal remains I don't trust that the market will have the patience for Patrick Laine. And I think if you can have the patience with Laine and give him time, I think you'll see goals come. But I just worry that the second you get to a 5-game streak where he maybe hasn't scored or maybe has like 10 games with 1 assist, the media will start, the fans will start. What are we doing here? Laine's not scoring. And I just think he needs to be in a market where it's just go and do it.
I mean, I feel like that's what Columbus was. But...
Yeah, but it's also about who passes you the puck. And like, and I know people are going to go, well, Johnny Gaudreau was there. But like Johnny Gaudreau's done nothing in Columbus. Like it's not been great. And like Adam Fantilli is going to have a bigger year this year, obviously. Sean Monahan's there as well. But I just feel like, I don't know. I just feel like Montreal don't have patience. And I think of all of the players in the league who need a bit of patience, I think Patrick Laine is the number one on that list where you need to be able to go, just ease into it, dude.
Yeah. Look, I hope it works out for him.
I hope it works out.
He hits the ground running, but
I like Laine, and I really want it to work out for him. And I think we know the talent's there. It's just, can someone unlock it? And the Edmonton Oilers, Vasily Podolskin from the Vancouver Canucks for a 2025 4th round pick.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what Podkolzin did to kind of get himself shipped out of Vancouver. Maybe it was a cap crunch or something, but I think a reasonably
he was another one who talked about. He was another one I think who talked about wanting a change of scenery and more time.
Right. Yeah, that was probably.
And look, it's interesting. We probably should also. It's not on our rundown, but we should probably, while we're here, address the other elephant in the room, of course, which is that while we were away, the Edmonton Oilers hired a general manager.
Yes.
Now, what was really frustrating for me was that I actually thought what they had going was working very well.
Yeah, I mean, all things considered, they did quite well without.
I didn't think you needed to make the move. However, they disagreed. And so going out and getting Stan Bowman is certainly a decision. Not a decision, by the way, that most Edmonton fans agreed with. There was a significant, I will give Edmonton credit, there was a significant amount of pushback on why are we doing this? We really don't need to do this. And I just look at it as, once again, Edmonton is trying to have a team in position, then go out and get a well-regarded general manager to come in and take credit for it. Like that's what happened with Ken Holland. Right? Yeah. They went out, remember, Connor McDavid, he was drafted by Ken Holland, but the pick was there.
They already had the pick, yeah.
Couldn't screw that one up. So, like, Ken Holland got to take credit for the build of the Edmonton Oilers, which was largely bumbling towards a Stanley Cup final. And now they get to a final, and you go out and bring in Scott Bowman. Stan Bowman, who obviously has certain character issues that are still questioned. Obviously, Sheldon Kennedy came out and said that he's done work. This was disputed by some people who said that he hasn't reached out to the other person involved in the lawsuit with the because no one knows still who they are and there's been no talks. So Sheldon Kennedy took a hit, which is saying something, because Sheldon Kennedy's reputation is usually fairly unimpeachable. But I look, I don't think Edmonton needed to do this. I don't quite understand why they did it.
I don't know why anyone needed to do it, to be honest. Like,
I just feel Edmonton feel like they think they need somebody with a reputation rather than getting the right person.
Even on the merits of what he did in the last several years in Chicago post like those cups, it's not great. Like, standing on like the last 5 to 10 years of his tenure there, like it's not a pretty picture. I don't understand why.
But it's like Ken Holland. Ken Holland was the same thing. He'd done absolutely nothing apart from absolutely run the Red Wings.
Once you have a name in as a GM or a coach in this league, you just kind of get work by default.
But that's the point. He'd run, Ken Holland had run the Red Wings into the ground trying to keep a playoff streak alive. Like when they really should have just retooled on the fly and could have fixed it. He ran them into the ground trying to make the playoffs every year, keep that streak alive, then jumped out of the aircraft and said, everything's okay. And with Edmonton, it's interesting too. Notice that Ken Holland left when there was a cap crunch again. Cap crunch, really tricky negotiations coming up. Like, what's the first thing now that Bowman's going to have to do?
Yeah.
First thing that Bowman has on his plate is he's got to work out the Draisaitl contract. And good luck. I know we're talking, a lot of the media talk at the moment is still about, well, Mitch Marner's up in 12 months and what are they going to do in Toronto? And the Draisaitl contract is far more important. I think you can take Marner off the Leafs and they'll be okay. Take Leon Draisaitl out of Edmonton, you got some problems.
Yeah.
So it is then a one-man band completely. So I think, obviously, I wouldn't have done it for a number of reasons. Yeah, outside of even the personality and the characteristics and the character flaws, I wouldn't have done it because I just think his record doesn't justify him as a modern general manager. But what do we know? Apparently not a lot. They are also at the moment in Edmonton trying desperately to convince Evander Kane that he wants to leave or go on LTIR and never play again. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
Good luck with getting Evander to be a team player.
Yeah, I mean, so it was funny to me though that immediately after this signing, within like a few days, the Edmonton Oilers were hit with 2 targeted offer sheets on their young players.
My favorite thing that I think I've heard was when they asked Armstrong about it afterwards. They asked him about, did you target them? What about the rules? And he goes, I wasn't aware of any agreement that says you couldn't target teams with an offer sheet. I wasn't aware that's a thing, and I don't really care. I'd expect people to do it to me.
Yeah, well, it's funny, they talk about like, no one wants to target other teams because they all respect each other too much and they don't want to get targeted or whatever, and then immediately, which is bullshit. But props to St. Louis, 2 successful offer sheets. So they targeted Philip Broberg with a 2-year 4.58 and then a bunch of numbers on the end. Essentially, it's the maximum that you can get for that pick compensation, which he signed, and the Oilers didn't match, so they got a second-round pick back in the compensation. And Dylan Holloway, 2 years at 2.29 for a third-round pick. And St. Louis had to trade back for their third to be able to do this from Pittsburgh. That was like another deal. So they acquired their own pick back to be able to make these trades.
I thought this was genius. I thought it was a brilliant move. I think the interesting part for me as well with the Holloway one in particular was a lot of people at the end of last season when we were talking about the rebuild, what they're going to do and what they're going to keep, Edmonton fans were just going, well, they've got to keep Dylan Holloway. You can't let Dylan Holloway go. You've got to keep Dylan Holloway in the building. And I think the St. Louis, and we'll talk about it a bit later because we've got a segment coming up about teams who think are going to do surprisingly well, teams we think are dropping, and teams who think have overestimated themselves. St. Louis make one of my lists, and this is a part of the reason for this. I think they're doing quietly a really good job here. And I think that is a very shrewd series of moves.
Yeah, it's a savvy move considering like it's hard to get young players in that are RFAs and to do it for a second and a third, even if maybe it's a potential overpay for some of these deals. I think they did very well, all things considered, considering the bind that Edmonton was in and just not being able to pay those guys.
Exactly. And look, are you going to get a player like Broberg for a second? Are you going to get a player like Holloway for a third? Like,
no.
It's a crapshoot. You'd be very lucky if you did. So give the picks. If you've got the picks, give the picks. Or go and get the pick back and then give the pick. So the extensions that have taken place. Matty Beniers, the first one, 7x714 in Seattle. Decent little deal.
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously he hasn't, broken out in a huge way offensively, but then again, no one in Seattle really does, so that's not really necessarily a knock on him. I think that's a fine deal. Yeah,
I I didn't include Seattle in any of my lists. I nothing Seattle. I just think they
yeah,
exist.
yeah.
In terms of the other deals, there are a couple of other deals here. The ones I want to really talk about: Quentin Byfield, 5x625 in LA. That was an interesting one because nobody was quite sure what that number was going to be. And
Yeah, yeah.
I think Byfield's a weird one because I think everyone can see what Byfield can be. He hasn't quite got there yet, so you're still taking a bit of a gamble on he will.
Which
If you
we're
buy,
seeing a lot more and more with these young contracts coming off ELCs and coming off, short deals and so forth. With teams taking a big swing on young players potentially hitting what they think that they will become in a few years' time.
yeah, I think that one was the one that I was most fascinated by the idea of. Travis Konechny, 8x875.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a little tax on that from being in Philly and being
Yeah,
the guy.
I definitely think again, and we'll get into Philly again in a minute because they can't have a normal off season, can they? They just can't. Martin Netchess is a really interesting one because remember he was the player that was going to be traded for Mitch Marner, and Toronto was going to be saved by him. 2x6.5. It's fine. It's a good little deal. I like that deal actually. Brock Faber 8x8.5.
Yeah, so obviously not a cheap one there, but again another one where
that was more than I thought.
Yeah, that's more than I expected as well. But obviously they're gambling on long term that's going to be a bargain.
And Caden Gurley, 6x555. Like
Which is fine.
The 555. Just sure.
Yeah.
Why not? Back to the Flyers, who are mental. They terminated the contract of Ryan Johansson for a material breach.
Which no one's saying anything about what it is.
No. It's nothing new. This happens all the time. And then Ryan Johansson is now going to grieve the termination with the NHLPA. The reason he's going to grieve it is if he grieves it with the NHLPA, 9 times out of 10, if you do this, they pay you out.
Yeah, you get some compensation from it.
So they're filing the grievance because he's going to get a payout. Ryan Getzlaf has joined the NHL Department of Player Safety in an undisclosed role that I can only assume is, yeah, that's how I did it. It feels kind of like that's what the role is going to be. When the NHL, Department of Player Safety has a habit of hiring people who largely their background is their ability to walk into player safety and go, yeah, that's what you do.
Yeah, I mean, look, I appreciate at least that they've hired a few more skilled guys over the last few years. It hasn't just been kind of, depth guys from, who had careers, in like
all-time fighters.
Liner. Yeah, that's it. Like, they need a few guys there who have, taken hits at some point in their career, and
they need to go. They need to go back to my favorite. Again, if you've never seen the sketches from the NHL Awards, the year that Will Arnett played Brendan Shanahan. I'm Brendan Shanahan, and I dropped the puck. Boom. So, and again, if you've never seen the videos that came from that, when Brendan Shanahan was head of player safety, and used to actually do videos of what was happening, where he would narrate them and talk about them. Yeah, you really need to go back. It was a wild era in player safety. So maybe they'll put Getzlaf out there.
Yeah, maybe that's his.
Getzlaf walks around and goes, now this is what he did. What I would have done to get away with it is this. Like, turn the body. The Toronto Maple Leafs have officially named forward Austin Matthews as the 26th captain in franchise history after he was able to not jump on a golf buggy and drive through a private residential area 24 hours before this announcement. Tavares has moved into an alternate captain role. This was always coming.
Yeah, at some point in time, the torch was going to get passed. I don't know if there was ever necessarily like a set date on when this was going to happen. They've been talking about it for years. It feels like it makes sense that with Tavares kind of taking on a little bit of a lesser role from a scoring perspective and so forth in the last year or so as well. Like, I think it's kind of like, all right, well, this is our chance to, go, all right, well, here's Austin. He's the guy of the future.
I mean, it makes it easier for Toronto too, because like Tavares is up this year. And look, they're going to get a deal done. He's going to stay for a much cheaper deal. But I think it makes it so much easier for the Leafs going forward if you're not negotiating with your captain.
Agreed. Yeah, there's an element of that adds a little bit of extra to your contract.
That helps. There's also a class action lawsuit going on, an antitrust lawsuit, which is over players who play in the CHL being banned from playing NCAA games. Now, this is actually quite important. It doesn't feel like it's that important to start with, but it has a lot to do with the idea of how long teams can actually control contracts. So with an entry-level contract, if you draft a player out of the CHL, the team holds the rights for 2 years. But if you draft a player out of the NCAA, it's 4. So it changes things like the contract. It's also part of this idea as well, is that it's like the NCAA is currently dealing with has been dealing with a bunch of lawsuits over payment to football players in particular. They're now having this sort of conversation around the hockey programs. What it will do is it will probably, if this happens, it will probably put it will probably ruin a couple of things. First of all, the USHL is probably going to die because at the moment, players who go to the NCAA can basically only really come from the USHL. Right. So, for example, like if you go back to Macklin Celebrini, played in the USHL because he played in the NCAA. Right. If you allow for dual CHL and NCAA contracts and you allow them to play in both, that probably kills the USHL off as an option for top players because they're probably going to want to play in the CHL and be more visible in Canada, have a higher profile, and probably raise their draft stock a little bit more. So it seems like something that's very minor, but it is something that has the ability to change the way players are drafted and the way their contracts develop over time. So
there's a lot of weird nuance in all the minor leagues and how they interact and how a player can go back to this league but they can't go to the AHL and they can't it's not all kind of one way or the other, but at the same time it's a very complicated situation.
And the element I'll just mention before we move on to the last part of this, which is going to be our off-season prediction thing. Well, it's not our full predictions. Our full prediction episode is coming up. This is just a couple of conversation points. But the other one I wanted to bring up just quickly is, did you see the stuff about Amanda Kessel and the fact that with Pittsburgh giving her a further promotion, now nobody is sure if she's playing this year or if she's going to retire.
Well, I think she's now like assistant GM or something for the AHL team, which it's tricky because also the women's season is so odd at times. It's kind of really compressed.
Well, remember, she sort of made noises that she was only really okay with playing for Boston because her sister, I think it's her sister-in-law, is the coach, and a bunch of her friends all play in Boston. And it was basically indicated to teams at the draft, don't draft her. Until the 7th round where Montreal went, screw this, Amanda Kessel's sitting there. And she was like, you can draft me. I'm not guaranteeing I'm coming to play.
Yeah.
So her rights belong to Montreal. The suggestion was the only way she'd play was if it was Boston.
Yeah.
I suspect she won't play. I suspect she'll.
I suspect not. I think that she's moving into a front office role.
I think she'll end up being in Pittsburgh's front office full time. That's my prediction. So we're going to move on to this little off-season activity that we've sort of put together. We have our full predictions episode, which will be happening closer to the season, including when we put together our undrafted players list, which that's always my favorite activity. And there's a lot of good ones, by the way, still sitting out there. So there's a
few that are going to get PTOs, I'm sure, coming up to.
Yep. So what we've got is there's 3 categories: 5 teams who have reason for renewed optimism, so they've got a reason for hope, reason to look forward. 5 teams that we think are likely to drop off, And then I put down 5 teams that are preparing for a false dawn. In other words, teams that think they're going to be good, and I don't think they're going to be good. So we're going to start with optimism because we love optimism here. We're here for the optimistic. And I'm going to lead us off, and I'm going to lead us off with your San Jose Sharks because it can't get any worse. Now, that's literally the whole reason. But no, look, in all honesty, the Sharks are going to be fun. We've got a new coach, a young coach. We've got a young roster who are going to grow and learn together and probably get their ass beaten up and down the ice all season. And no one's going to care because Macklin Celebrini is going to be amazing. And they're going to grow. They're going to develop. We're going to see some things. Mark-Edouard Vlasic's going to play. I mean, what more could you want? A Mark-Edouard Vlasic, Cody Ceci blue line. Think about that. Think about the pylons. Like,
it's going to be entertaining if nothing else.
Nothing is going to be able to hold up the roof at the SAP Center quite like Cody Ceci on one side and Mark-Edouard Vlasic on the other. They're not moving for anybody. So I'm going to give the Sharks are my first one. Give me your first team.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to go. I'm going to hold on to one of them till later because I think it's going to be more interesting that way. I'm actually going to say Utah. I think Utah are an interesting proposition because, and obviously they don't have a history to kind of be, to have optimistic about. But obviously, if you think about them as coming from the Coyotes and moving here, like I think that there's a clean slate for them here to really kind of forget all the past and now have an opportunity with a team that's willing to like pay players that maybe can bring in free agents that actually kind of has some renewed kind of sense that they might compete in the near future. I think it's kind of all blue skies for Utah.
Interesting. They're going to come up for me later.
Interesting. So I tried to avoid one that I knew that you had in a later thing, but I wonder how many of ours will clash on.
I'm really fascinated by this. When we say to people, we do not discuss this. We do not discuss this because it's far more fun to talk about it live.
Yeah, I want to be clear. I don't think that they're going to be great, but I think that they have reasons to have an optimistic future. And
when we put this forward, part of the reason for the conversation was you can justify this however you want. Renewed optimism in terms of they're all going to get paid. That's optimism. Okay, my next one I'm going to do is obvious, and I nearly actually put them in a false dawn, but I might that they won't be bad. I'm going to put Nashville there.
Like I also have Nashville.
I think like the Central, and there's a bit of a theme that's going to develop with a couple of my picks here. The Central is really soft. Yeah. It's really, really soft, and Nashville has just put together really good pieces. And I think if you
they've picked up a couple of the biggest free agents, whether or not long term there's any viability in that. Right now, they have a competitive team. Yeah, exactly right. Right now, they have a competitive team.
So we've both got Nashville there. So I'll do another one.
Nashville.
That's it. I've got St. Louis.
Interesting. I don't actually have St. Louis in any of my lists.
And I've got St. Louis because, again, first of all, the Central is really soft, and secondly, as I said before when we were talking about the offer sheets, if you actually look at their roster, they've gotten younger and not inexperienced younger. They've gotten experienced younger players. They've managed to quietly turn the roster over a little bit. You've got, if you look at what they've sort of got going for them here at the moment, it's like you look at it and go, they're probably a superstar away from being vaguely really good. But Buchnevich is always solid. Jordan Kyrou is solid. Robert Thomas is solid. You've got all of those players there. You've got Kapanen, Sundqvist on a bottom line. Jake Neighbors is there.
Look, I'm not super impressed by the roster, but they're okay. They're fine.
It's what I'm saying though is for me, the reason why I'm looking at the positivity here is it's more solid than what they were. They've made their coaching. They made their coaching change. Right? They made their coaching shift. I think they're probably going to be better than everyone anticipates they're going to be. And a large reason for that, again, is where they're playing. And I think that's going to help them.
I think they always had an awkward transition that was going to happen out of the old, guard there in terms of like Shen and Ryan O'Reilly and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, they were the definition of we won the cup and don't care anymore.
Yeah, so I think that they've done a reasonably good job at kind of bringing in a new young core and starting to kind of turn that around.
Yep. Okay. Your next one.
Okay. I have New Jersey because I think that, everything went so awful for them last year. They've actually, addressed their goaltending situation. They have, shored up a couple of, issues that they had. I think that they have no real reason then to look up and kind of think, well, that it's not all going to fall apart on us again this year. We can actually kind of maybe live up to our potential.
I have New Jersey as well. And
Yeah.
I feel like the prospects are all at that point now where that step's coming and that step's here.
Yeah, I think, I thought that it was coming last year. Obviously, they got a bit sunk by goaltending and a bunch of other things.
I think they need to get the Dawson Mercer contract fixed. That needs to happen. Yeah. But once they've got that done, they were in on Askarov, and I think Askarov would have been the final piece they really needed to push forward. Their goaltending is better than it was.
They've addressed it. They've improved.
And again, one of the things we know about me, I'm a Sheldon Keefe truther, and I believe firmly in Sheldon Keefe. And I think you put Keefe with that lineup, and I think they're going to do really good things. And so I fully believe in the New Jersey Devils being much better this year, and they've got every reason to look like they're going to perform. My last one in this 5 teams to have renewed optimism is Vancouver.
Interesting. Okay.
And my rationale behind this is that basically the start of the year last year, they were just shooting stupid levels. Like the shooting was off the charts. Yeah. I think for me, looking at Vancouver going forward, injuries are what really crashed them at the end of last year. Like they got to the playoffs, everyone got injured, they were done. If they can keep everybody healthy, I actually think they're going to, again, look at where they're playing there in the Pacific, and it won't surprise you to know there's a bunch of Pacific teams coming up in my list. And I look at Vancouver and go, I think a lot of the only problem I see for Vancouver is that I think so much of Vancouver is tied to if the goal is healthy. If that's Demko,
obviously we know that Demko may be missing the start of the season already, which it's just a matter of how long that is.
If you know how I talked before about patience with Patrick Laine. Vancouver, no matter what happens, Vancouver need to be really patient about how they bring Thatcher Demko back. Do not rush him. If you have a bumpy start to the season, don't rush him. Because if you take the time with Demko and he is fit when you bring him back, you'd rather have Demko for the rest of the year rather than stop, start. Because that's what derailed them at the end of last year. Demko couldn't keep fit.
Yeah.
So, that's what I do there. What's your last one?
So I've got a couple of I technically have 2 left because we had one matching. So, but I think I'm going to group these a little bit, and I think for a similar reason, in that both of these teams coming into the offseason, I had concerns about them not taking a huge step back. And I think that both teams did a pretty reasonable job, all things considered, with the absolute cap crunch that they had to come out of it looking relatively good. And that's Tampa and Edmonton.
I knew that was coming.
Yeah. I held off on Edmonton because I know that you have them in another list, but
we're in our alternate year. We have an alternate year with Edmonton, and
I mean, look, we were talking about not so long ago about how totally screwed they were with being able to bring back people, and obviously that resulted in them losing a couple of players to offer sheets. But all things considered, they brought back a lot of guys that they needed to bring back. I'm not saying that they're a perfect team or anything by any means, but it could have been way worse for them. And I think that they should be able to look at their roster and go, we can compete again this year.
I see what you're getting at with them. I'll let you talk about Tampa first, because then I can segue into my drop-off list, which is going to lead off with Edmonton. So
yeah. So I mean, look, I had Tampa. I could have put Tampa in a few different lists. Honestly, I think there's some question marks there, but Jake Gensel was the biggest free agent in terms of like age and potential, and they were the ones that managed to snare him. If they didn't get him and they lost Stamkos, they would have been totally fucked. Like all things considered, they, obviously they lose Sergachev in a trade, just as a cap casualty and everything. But there's still a lot of pieces to like there. There's still a really high-powered power play and et cetera, everything that makes them good. I don't think that they're the high-flying, 3 lines, of deadly players team that Tampa that they used to be, but they're still a lot better than they probably could have been given how many runs at the Cup they've had.
I think Tampa are one of the most fascinating teams this year because I think the evolution of Tampa is going to be interesting. What John Cooper makes them into with the new players is going to be fascinating. I don't know what they're going to be. Like, no, I don't have them. I don't have them on a list, and I thought about all 3. I had Tampa in all 3 at one point, and I went, if I got them in all 3, I can't have them in any. And I took them out. I'm going to lead. I was
on the line with that too.
I'm going to lead with my first to drop off, and we're going to lead off with the Edmonton Oilers. And my rationale behind this is really simple. It's the odd season, folks. No, literally, we all know, and come at me, Edmonton fans. I know you're waiting for it. You've been waiting all off season. You haven't had a chance in a while. I genuinely think what they did in the off season in terms of the players they added were really good. I genuinely do. I don't trust the consistency in Edmonton still. I still don't trust the goaltending in Edmonton perpetually. I think if they don't get the Draisaitl deal done early, that's going to become a really loud problem. And I just feel like as well, and I know that I'm going to get absolutely crushed by people for saying this, but the last time I said it, I got it damn right. We're due for a Connor McDavid injury season. We're due. We are absolutely due for one. And, I think he wasn't 100% fit at the start of last year, and you saw what happened.
Yeah.
And how long can you run McDavid like that before he breaks? And we've seen it. I'm not saying, look, would it shock me if Edmonton came back out and walked the Pacific? No, it wouldn't. But we know I'm bold. We know I like making my bold takes. And I want to trust that Edmonton's going to get this right. I also don't trust the general manager hire. And that's my other big thing is I don't trust what they've done in the front office. And I thought that Jeff Jackson was doing a great job, and I didn't think he needed to make that move. And I just wonder if it becomes too much of a distraction going forward. But we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, that's very fair. I think that very much could also happen. I took a real tap in with my first 5 teams likely to drop off because I picked Washington, and obviously they made the playoffs and really didn't deserve to, based on like a whole bunch of 1-goal games and a bunch of luck and a really weak Metro division. I don't think that they're gonna have any chance of doing that again.
I left Washington off my list because my answer was duh.
It's an obvious one, but that was like when I had to start listing the teams, that was the clear.
I didn't see it as a drop off because I don't think it's a drop off. I just think.
Well, I think that they were bad last year, but they managed to be
they got a playoff
seeded most in a bad road.
They got a playoff position because someone has to. It's the idea of being the top scorer on the San Jose Sharks because somebody needs to.
Yeah. But they also just had like an absurd record in like 1-goal games. They basically got incredibly lucky.
Yeah. I mean, we'll ask the question now because I think we'll talk about it in more depth later on. Is Ovi getting there?
Getting to the Gretzky record? I'm concerned about the pace for sure, but like it is really going to come down to it, isn't it? Like it's really going to come down to that last like year or two. To me, it's just a matter of how long he can keep playing. Because he's not getting any younger or anything. Like I think that he could put up. What did he get? I think he hit 30 this last year. I think that he could hit 30 again. I actually think that he got a little bit unlucky at the start of the year, and he probably deserved a little bit better than he had.
They were trying so hard to get him to score. My big problem.
Yeah, so he got 31 last year. I suspect that he will get close to that again this year, and then I think that he's like 20 or 30 off, right? Like, what does he need to get to?
My big problem for Washington is how far over the cap they are. They're 10.2 over.
Yeah.
Which is mental.
1,072 he needs to get to, right?
Yep.
No, that can't be right. No, that's professional goals. That's not NHL goals.
Yeah, so here we are. NHL records. NHL records are actually one of the rare ones to use this for.
894.
894.
So,
he's at 853. It's very doable.
Yeah, so he's 39 off tying him.
I think he'll get there.
Yeah, I think so too. Even if he has two 20-goal seasons, he will get there.
I think, and look, we all know that Alex Ovechkin is going to play until he has the record.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not a matter of whether or not he should, whether or not he will.
Okay, so my next drop-off team.
Yeah, he has 2 years on his contract to do it. I wouldn't be shocked at all to see him hit it and then retire.
So I've got, by the way, my 5 drop-off teams are absolute fire. So my second drop-off team is Florida.
I considered it. I thought about it. I couldn't justify it.
First of all, cup hangovers are a real thing.
Yeah. That was the factor.
And secondly, and far more importantly, we talked about the idea of it's the odd year we're due for the McDavid injury and we're due for Edmonton being bad. We are so overdue for Sergei Bobrovsky becoming a pumpkin.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's going to happen at some point.
I have absolutely no doubt that this is the year that Bobrovsky goes, yeah, I don't care. Got my cup. Don't really care anymore. So I still think they're the most complete roster in the NHL. But I just feel like playing as the cup holder is a different thing. And I don't know how Florida are going to do with that. And again, I think a lot of it is going to be Bobrovsky because let's face it, while they were brilliant in the Stanley Cup finals, Bobrovsky was a very large part of the reason they won. He was a very large part, especially in those early rounds. Bobrovsky was on fire. If you get a Bobrovsky massive drop off, yeah, and again, doesn't mean they're going to miss the playoffs, but I'm saying, are they going to drop off? Well, they won the Stanley Cup last year. I don't think they're going to win it this year, so I've got them as a drop off.
Yeah, no, that's fair, absolutely. I put Boston for my next one because there's this absurd team that just you look at their roster up and down and you kind of go, how the fuck are they doing this?
I didn't put Boston in there because again I was just like,
it has to happen at some point. Like, look, I know that they added like Elias Lindholm and so forth, but like there's just so little there, and
their
I think that
was their goalie tandem.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. I think that they also sold on the goalie tandem. That was like the thing that was really keeping them afloat. I still don't understand why they did that. But now instead of a strong goalie tandem, they're going to be rolling out Jonas Korpisalo for 20-30 games a year. I imagine that they have to drop off at this point.
Yeah, I understand that one completely. I had 5 really fire ones and therefore didn't put them in there. Who am I going to go next? Okay, I'll go next one is an easy one, Dallas. And the reason I've got Dallas is that Father Time is undefeated. And I think as much as people are going to go, Pavelski's not a massive, yeah, he is. Like, he was very central to the way that DeBoer hockey works.
And even that top line, like they haven't really had the same,
they didn't have the spark. And look at what happened in the playoffs last year. They got to the playoffs. They started to look like they were going to be great. And then the production just vanished. Like the production just vanished. And I look at Dallas and DeBoer is not the sort of coach to go out and want to get younger. He doesn't like that. He likes older players. So I don't see them going out and refreshing it massively. I think that Dallas are going to take a bit of a step back this year. I can see that. Undefeated.
That's fair. All right, I had Carolina. I think that in a similar kind of way, like it hasn't really kind of worked out. I think that they've had better teams on paper in the last few years, and kind of thinning out now. They're starting to kind of lose a lot of, and those teams were when, like, Jordan Stoll was still a threat, and now he's kind of their fourth liner, and now that, I think that some of the gambles they've taken on, like Kokiniemi and all that kind of stuff, haven't necessarily kind of panned out for them. I don't love kind of the potential of their roster right now.
Carolina feels to me like a team that's going to take a step back so that Tulsi can take a step forward. Like, it feels like they've got to have a sort of bumpy season for Tulsi to be able to overturn the roster and freshen it up. So
I think that there's also got some retool coming for them.
They've also got some contracts coming off the books at the end of the year, and I think that Carolina will, in 12 months' time. Like, look, the other interesting one that I'm just going to put this one out there into the ether. If the Draisaitl contract isn't done, Carolina's going to have some space. And they've got some contracts coming off the books, and it's just like the Carolina Hurricanes to go, why don't we go out and get Leon Draisaitl and give him a max contract? That feels Carolina to me. Now, the next of my drop-off teams is the New York Rangers.
Interesting.
Because you can only rely on the best goalie in the world being the best goalie in the world for so long. And you can only rely on Adam Fox to hold up your whole defense for so long. And
I agree with that for sure.
Look, Shesterkin is the best goalie in the world. I don't give a crap what Bobrovsky did in the playoffs. Igor Shesterkin is the best goalie in the world.
No, I agree.
Now, he's due a big contract this year too. That's going to be a really fascinating.
I think that's going to be the nail. Like that's where, because he's going to get paid. He's going to get absolutely paid, and that's going to put a big dent in their ability to continue to improve.
If he doesn't look, if he's not going to get paid properly, welcome to San Jose. Welcome to San Jose, and meanwhile, we'll trade Askarov to you. And there you go. What a trade. But no, I think, look, Igor Shesterkin is going to get paid. And they don't have the cap. Well, we talked about this at the end of last season when we talked about them after they got eliminated. And I said, the big problem with the Rangers that no one pays attention to is look at their cap. They are coming up on an absolute disaster. And
so I had the Rangers in my New Dawn category for a similar reason, basically, that that I think that people will expect big things from them, and it might just not all come together in the same way this year.
Yeah, see, I don't think they're going to sort of even have that. I think they're just going to fall. I just think they're going to fall off an absolute cliff. Your next one, and then I've got my last of my five, and my last of my five is a big one.
Okay. So I've got two left in my drop-offs. I have Colorado because it's similar to Carolina. They've really thinned out.
They were right on my cusp.
Yeah, like there's some guys on there in the depth of their roster now where I'm just like, I don't know. This used to be a really deep team, and now, like, look, obviously they've still got some really good defensemen, but even that they've kind of lost some of the the potential future studs and so forth. I don't know. They look a lot more average than they ever have before. That's for sure.
Yeah, I feel like they look, and like we both picked them last year, and they both look fallible. They both look real. They look really fallible as a lineup. My last team that I'm going to say here that I think is going to drop off is the Toronto Maple Leafs. I do not trust the coach. I do not trust the general manager. I do not trust the way that roster is built. I do not trust the fact they are basically bringing back the same damn team again to do the exact same thing again, to get eliminated the exact same way again, and they're just going to say they're going to do it tougher this time. They are. I do not believe that they've made the right coach hire. I do not think they've got the right general manager. I think the Mana stuff is going to be the biggest distraction you have ever seen in your life. And it is going to drag and drag and drag. And by the time we get to about November, we are going to be sick of it. And it is still going to go. And when we get to the trade deadline, it's going to be deafening. Because you're going to have people going, well, if he's not going to re-sign, you got to move him at the deadline. And why do they invite this upon themselves? Like, you could sort the Mana thing out. Get it done. Whatever you're going to do, get it out of the way, move it all along, and just move on with your lives. No, let's keep the problems. Let's keep the drama. Let's keep everyone calling us names and putting more pressure on us. They're stupid.
So I have the Leafs in my false dawn group as well for a similar reason. I think that they'll come in. They'll probably, as always, kind of have a bunch of hype around, like, oh, look at this, great, we're doing this, or whatever, and then just, but maybe it was better. It would have been better to pick them last season when everyone thought that, like, oh, they've done everything they need to do. They've added all this grit and all that kind of stuff, but they're doing the same shit again.
Spoiler alert! I've got the Atlantic in most of my columns.
Yeah, fair.
So, like, the Atlantic's weird. Who's your last?
So my final one for a drop off is actually Pittsburgh. I think that's maybe not a huge kind of controversy considering they've obviously missed the playoffs the last couple of years, but I think that, like, they're still in this kind of weird flux stage where they're obviously taking cap dumps. They're they're cycling around a lot of players that weren't on their roster last year. Like, looking at the the guys that are playing for them this year, there's like 4 or 5 forwards that weren't on the team last year. There's 3 defensemen, I think, that they'll probably play regular games for them that weren't on the roster last year. There's a lot of I don't know. I think there's a lot of question marks there. I think that if I wouldn't put it past them potentially that they kind of reach their actual potential and slip into a wild card spot like Washington did last year, but I don't think that the odds are for them being a super strong team.
I'd love to see them make it in and prove everyone wrong. I don't like their shot.
Yeah. I don't like the chances get less and less. Like, as much as, like, I never bet against Sidney Crosby, he can't do it all on himself on his own.
Now, the 5 teams preparing for a false dawn. Look, let's just get the easier one for me out of the way. The Montreal Canadiens.
I have them in there as well.
Montreal Canadiens, and this is, look, every year the Montreal Canadiens are the coming force of the NHL. Every year they've had the smartest moves they've made, the greatest moves they've made. They've got all of this potential. They are a hot team. They've got the greatest coach that hasn't won a cup yet. They've got all of this, the superstar talent in Montreal. And every year it is so overhyped. And every year it is missing key pieces. And every year it's hurt by injuries, or, oh, we just didn't get puck luck, or our goalie is injured nonstop. Or I don't know, like the French media has a meltdown and blames everybody else. I don't know what goes on in Montreal. All I know is that, again, a club that needs to be patient and let this grow organically.
Yeah, there's a lot of optimism for a team that doesn't seem quite ready yet.
Look, this is, again, I know we bring it up all the time, but like, they made the Pandemic Cup final and believed that they were the greatest thing walking the face of the earth, and the next year got a really big reality check. And if you look at it, and like, I've seen so much of Habs social media, and they are seriously deluded right now. There are levels of delusion going on with the players they've got, where these are the greatest players that have ever been drafted, and this organization is so 4D chess ahead of everybody else. It's ridiculous. And it's not. It's just not. So you had Montreal as well?
Yeah, I had Montreal on that list as well. I've already mentioned I had Rangers and Leafs that you mentioned previously in that list. But I also have the Flyers in there because I think that they're a team that are getting kind of some a little bit of hype, a little bit of kind of at times where they've looked formidable. That there's like oh, they're on the up and up. There's still not a lot of great there. Like, as much as like I'm excited to see Matvei Michkov and there's some players there that are worth it. There's a lot of holes in this roster.
I think the biggest question for the off season that no one's asking yet is how exactly is John Tortorella going to screw up Matvei Michkov?
Yeah.
What form of emotional torture and torment is he going to put him through? How is he going to break Matvei Michkov as a human being? Because that's what we're all waiting for. What is John Tortorella? He's going to say that he doesn't play the strong way. He's not powerful enough. He's a bit of a lazy player. He doesn't have the work ethic or the grit or determination that you need to succeed in this league. Something along those lines. It's coming. It's coming. Wait for the first Torts quote. It'll happen probably second week of camp is when you'll get a comment from Torts about Mitchkov needs to work harder. It's coming. My second one of my teams I've got in my preparing for a false dawn is Utah. And my reason for putting them there, while yes, it's a better situation in some ways because, they're getting paid. There was a lot of bluff and bluster how this is an organization that is not scared to spend money. And this is an organization that is going to go out there and is going to recruit and is going to get everyone they need. And they're not sitting back. And
look, to be fair, they haven't done anything since the draft. That is true.
No. And look, I can already hear, somebody is going to start screaming, because there'll be Utah fans out there because there's always people jump on the bandwagon, going, but they got Sergachev, and it's like, well, yeah, they did. They got Sergachev. Good. They're pairing him with Sean Dursey. Not a great pairing. I don't mind Dursey as a player, but not at $6 million. And they're paying a lot of potential, and for a team that the league is going to want to be hot out of the gate, I don't think it's quite what people are expecting. I don't think they're going to have a bad season. I think they're going to be overhyped.
Yeah.
And when I say false dawn, I don't mean they're going to be terrible. I like a lot of their players. I like a lot of their young players. I think they've got some great young players, but I just think you're going to get so much overhype for what this is going to be, largely led by the organization, which talks itself up every 2.5 seconds. And they're going to tell you how good they're going to be, and they're not going to quite reach that level. And that's sort of where I'm looking at for that. Should I do another one, given you've mentioned a couple?
Yeah, do one more. I've only got one more in my list that I haven't mentioned.
Yeah, well, I will mention one, and then you do one, and then I'll do the last two because my last two sort of go together. So the Winnipeg Jets.
That is who I also have in my list.
I'm sorry, Winnipeg fans, Shannon. Yeah. You're a mess. You are an absolute mess of an organization.
Look, I know that people got excited about them at the end of last season, but I don't know. I don't see it.
You are a mess that is completely reliant on a goalie being unreal. And he's so spotty. And you as goes Connor Hellebuck, go the Jets. And again, like at some point, I talked about this a bit with the Rangers and stuff like that. At some point, you need a bit more. And the puck's got to go in the net consistently. I don't see it. I just don't see it. And I think they're lacking too much in all areas for a team that thinks they're going to be amazing.
Yeah, I still don't really kind of know really how they came out of nowhere and made a little bit of noise at the end of last year. I'm kind of not expecting to see that happen again. I don't think they're going to be terrible, but I just think that they've awoken some excitement in the fan base that they probably won't live up to.
Yeah, again, I think there's a lot of this is the fan base thinks they're amazing. Yeah. And look, by all means, support your team, talk them up, hype them. Great, fantastic. You support a team, support that. Sharks. I'm all over the Sharks. Are we going to suck? We're going to suck. But am I all over this and I'm going to talk them up? And are you going to get that Mike Greer meme? Probably not, because people got shit. But still, have a sense of perspective. Have a sense of perspective. I just don't think they've got enough perspective with Winnipeg, and they want them to be something they're not quite. My last two, when the 5 teams preparing for a false dawn, go together. Ottawa, Buffalo.
Yeah, I definitely considered Ottawa.
It is the co-off-season champions of the past 3 years. In the past 3 years, every year, either Ottawa won the off-season or Buffalo won the off-season.
Sometimes it was New Jersey, to be fair.
And once again, we're going to get a story where either someone says Ottawa won the off-season because Ullmark, or Buffalo won the off-season because they've made the coaching change. And we've already seen a couple of stories of Rasmus Dahlin relishing new role. And that's already started to come out. And I'm like, what new role? He's the same damn role he's been in the whole time. We're going to get narratives out of both of these organizations, which are going to be, they're putting it together the right way. They're building for the future. They're going to be the sleeper team, and it'll be both of them because it's always both of them. And I just think that we've had enough of Ottawa and Buffalo pretending they're going to be great. I'd like to see it now. I nearly put, and I know, again, Tim is watching, I nearly put the Red Wings in there, but I don't necessarily even think that most Red Wings fans are prepared for the false dawn. I think the hardest team for me to put anywhere, we talked about a couple of them, the team that I looked at and really I couldn't, apart from Tampa, was Detroit.
Yeah.
And for different reasons. For Tampa, it's because they could be amazing. They could be terrible. We don't know what the rebuild's going to look. For Detroit, what are they doing? Is it?
I don't know what the expectations are on them. To know.
Are they tanking? Is it a rebuild? Is it a build? Is it a build on the move? I don't know. Is it a retooling? I don't know what Detroit is. So I can't put them in a category because they don't fit a category. They just exist on this other plane, and it's a plane that's nowhere near playoffs. And that's, I think, a really important point. I don't think they're going to get near it again because I don't think they know what they are. Like, how do you get better if you don't know where you sit? And I don't.
Yeah, it's tricky. Like, I think there's a lot of teams who maybe pulled out of the rebuild too quickly, like in terms of like they didn't quite reach like the star level of that they needed to get to, and they haven't done enough to kind of get across that line. And I think they're just kind of part of those teams that are like good but not good enough.
Yes. They fall into that category of, if you squint, you might think this is going to be great. But or if you look at, again, with Detroit, if you look at the name Steve Yzerman as the general manager, you go, they're going to be amazing. I'm wondering how long Yzerman gets to do nothing. Like, I wonder. That's a big question. I think we're going to have another one in the preseason where we're going to talk about big questions that need answering. And I think that Steve Yzerman one, I think, is going to be a big one. The last thing I'll mention just quickly, because I asked about if anyone had any questions, and it was about which teams do you think will take a big step forward that didn't make it. I think we've kind of answered that in the way we've talked about renewed optimism. I do want to address Chicago because poor Jojo is out there defending Chicago. They're not going to be good.
No, I mean, like, obviously they're still a little while away. They've got some reasons to be optimistic.
It's still a thing.
Like, yeah, I mean, look, I think that I don't think that's the biggest problem. Like, they're still, there's going to be a lot of guys that will be good there eventually, but it's not going to be this year.
No, they've got a few more years of not being great, which is good because they've got the picks to not be good. So that's going to do us for this week. We'll be back. We're going to, probably by the next podcast, we'll be able to sort of give you a very regular schedule. That's what we're aiming for. We're also aiming to make sure that we resolve all of the different issues in terms of where the hell it will let us stream and won't stream, because they keep changing the rules. So we should have that all resolved by the next episode as well. So we will fix all of that up. In the meantime, again, share the podcast around. I'll be up on the podcast feeds. Share the podcast around with people. Share the video around with people. It really helps us if you like and comment, all those sorts of things which sound really mundane and trite. They really do help a lot. And they help people find the show, and they help us get better and get better guests. We've got a lot of plans. I've got a lot of plans this year about, there are people I'm sort of trying to get on the show. The more you share it, the more you talk about it, the better the chances are that we can do that. So that'll do us for this week. Thank you everyone for listening, for watching and catching up, and we'll catch you all later.
See ya.